Hey folks, today we're going to delve into a story about how the ultimate act of disrespect can trigger the ultimate, most calculated form of justice. We are going to hear the story of Jack, a man who, on his 50th birthday, was thrown a surprise party by his ex-wife. The cruel twist? The party was in the very house he had designed and built, the house she had taken from him in a bitter divorce. And her new husband, once Jack's best friend, was the host. They wanted to stage his public humiliation, a final nail in the coffin of his old life. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated the quiet man they thought they had broken. So before we dive in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I'm doing here. It really does help the channel grow. Also, let us know where you are listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. The laughter in the room felt like sandpaper grinding against my soul. It was a sound I once associated with joy, with holidays, and shared memories inside these very walls. Now it was a weapon, and it was aimed directly at me. My ex-wife, Sarah, stood in the center of the living room, her arm looped through the arm of my former best friend, Mark. She raised a champagne flute, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. The room, filled with people I had known for decades, fell into a hushed anticipation. "To Jack," she announced, her voice dripping with a sweetness so artificial it could give you a toothache. 50 years young, may the next 50 be as full of surprises as this one. The crowd erupted in a fresh wave of laughter and polite applause. They were celebrating my milestone, but it felt like they were applauding her victory. Her new husband, Mark, clapped me on the shoulder with a hollow thud. "Happy birthday, old friend," he murmured, his eyes avoiding mine. I stood there, a ghost at my own feast, in the architectural masterpiece I had poured my heart into designing and building for my family, a family that no longer existed. Sarah walked over to me, her movements sleek and predatory, like a panther who had successfully cornered her prey. She leaned in close, the scent of her expensive perfume a ghost of a memory. "You're welcome to stay for cake," she sneered, her voice a low whisper just for me. It was the final twist of the knife, the one meant to break me completely. She wanted to see me crumble, to see me flee from my own home in shame. I looked at her, at the woman I had shared a bed with for 20 years, the woman who had borne my children, now a stranger with eyes full of malice. I did not give her the satisfaction. I simply nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. And with that nod, I glanced across the room, over the heads of the smiling guests, and made eye contact with a waiter standing near the grand fireplace. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, but his eyes were not those of a simple server. They were sharp, intelligent, and focused. He saw my signal. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod in return. The gears of a machine they could not see had just begun to turn. Sarah, misinterpreting my silence as defeat, just smiled wider and turned back to her adoring crowd. They had no idea. The party was just getting started. The end of my marriage was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, structural collapse. For 2 decades, I had been the quintessential provider. I worked tirelessly at my architectural firm, designing homes and buildings that won awards, bringing in a comfortable living that afforded us this beautiful house, the private schools for our 2 sons, the yearly vacations. I thought I was building a fortress of happiness and security. I was so focused on the blueprints of our future that I failed to see the fault lines forming in the foundation of our present. Sarah called it emotional neglect. That was the phrase her lawyer, a shark in a $3,000 suit, used in court. She claimed I was married to my work, that I was a provider of things but not of presence. I was a stranger in my own home. There was a sliver of truth in it, the kind of sliver a skilled lawyer can wedge into a crack and split a life wide open. I had been absent for some school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I had worked late, believing I was doing it for them, for us. The real betrayal, however, was not my absence, but who had filled that void. Mark had been my best friend since college. We had been each other's best man. Our families grew up together. When I was on late-night site visits, he was over at our house for dinner with Sarah. I thought it was a blessing. Having a friend so close, he was like family. I never suspected he was slowly, methodically taking my place, not just at the dinner table, but in my wife's bed. The discovery was banal, almost cliché. A misplaced phone, a series of text messages that read like a script from a cheap soap opera. But the pain was unique and profound. It was a double amputation. In one swift, brutal moment, I lost my wife and my best friend. The divorce was a bloody affair. Sarah and Mark, now a united front, painted me as the villain, the cold, career-obsessed husband. They twisted my dedication into a character flaw, my hard work into a form of abandonment. The final, most devastating blow was the house. This house. It was more than wood, glass, and stone to me. It was a living, breathing testament to my life's philosophy. I had designed every inch of it, from the way the morning light hit the kitchen island to the acoustics of the great room where my sons used to practice their instruments. It was my legacy, a physical manifestation of my love for my family. And she took it. Her lawyer argued that she and the boys, who were then in high school, needed stability, and that the house was the only true home they had ever known. The judge, a woman who looked at me with thinly veiled disdain, agreed. Sarah got the house. 6 months later, Mark moved in. 8 months after that, they were married. I moved into a sterile downtown apartment that felt like a waiting room for the rest of my life. My sons, caught in the crossfire, became distant. They would visit, but their conversations were stilted. Their eyes filled with a confusion and loyalty I could not untangle. They were living in my house with my ex-wife and my ex-best friend. The man they were supposed to call their stepfather was the very man who had shattered their family. The injustice of it all was a constant, low-grade fever in my blood. For a long time I was adrift in a sea of grief and anger. My work suffered. I felt like an imposter, designing dream homes for other families when my own had been bulldozed. But then, something shifted. It started with a phone call. It was a loan officer from a bank I had never done business with, calling to follow up on a commercial loan application. An application for $250,000, filed under a holding company I had never heard of, but with my name and credentials listed as the primary guarantor. I told the officer it was a mistake, a fraud. He apologized and promised to look into it. A week later, another call. This time from a private investor in another state, a man named Mr. Henderson, asking about the prospectus for a luxury condo development. He mentioned that Sarah and Mark had pitched it to him, leveraging my name and my firm's portfolio as proof of its viability. The fog of my depression began to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They had not just taken my wife, my friend, and my home. They were actively using my life's work, my reputation, to finance their new life together. They were committing fraud, and they were so arrogant as to believe I was too broken to notice or do anything about it. That was their first mistake. They mistook my grief for weakness. I did not confront them. I did not call a lawyer, not yet. An architect knows that before you build, you must survey the land and draw up a detailed plan. I began to dig. I spent my nights not wallowing in self-pity, but poring over old financial statements, making quiet phone calls, and piecing together the puzzle. It was a complex web of deceit, small loans from trusting friends, and larger investment schemes pitched to people who only knew me by my reputation. They were using my name as a key to unlock other people's money. The final piece of my plan fell into place when I received the invitation. A thick, cream-colored cardstock with gold-embossed lettering. "You are invited to a surprise 50th birthday party for Jack Riley." It listed the address, my address, and the hosts, Sarah and Mark. The audacity was breathtaking. It was not a peace offering. It was a victory lap. It was a public execution of my pride. They wanted to gather our entire social circle into my former home, with them as the gracious new lords of the manor, and me as the guest of honor, the pitiable fool they had vanquished. I stared at the invitation for a long time. The old Jack would have thrown it in the trash. The old Jack might have drunk himself into a stupor. But the man I was becoming saw it for what it was, an opportunity, a stage, perfectly set for a final performance. My next call was not to a lawyer, but to a man named David Chen. David ran Prestige Events, the most sought-after event planning and catering company in the city. 5 years earlier, I had saved his company's flagship project, a multi-million-dollar event center, from a catastrophic design flaw made by a previous architect. I had worked pro bono for 3 weeks straight to fix it, saving him from bankruptcy and ruin. He told me then, "Jack, if you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me." I was now making that call. I met him in his sleek, minimalist office overlooking the city. I laid it all out. David listened patiently, his expression shifting from sympathy to a hard, focused anger on my behalf. "They hired a catering company for the party already," I said, sliding a piece of paper across his desk. "A smaller, newer outfit." David glanced at the name and smirked. "I know them. They'd leap at the chance to be a subcontractor for Prestige on a high-profile gig." "What do you have in mind, Jack?" "I need your team inside," I explained. "Not as caterers, but as technicians. I need a hidden projector, a flawless sound system, and operators who will not flinch. I need you to be my Trojan horse." David's smirk turned into a broad grin. "Consider it done," he said, his voice firm. "This is going to be the most memorable party this city has ever seen. They want to serve you cake, Jack. Let's serve them justice instead." Leaving his office, that I felt a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. I held the golden ticket invitation in my hand. It was a summons to my own humiliation. But as I walked to my car, I saw it differently. It was a blueprint, and I, the architect, was about to execute my design. The invitation called it a surprise party. They had no idea how right they were. The night of the party, I drove myself. I parked a block away from the house, my house, and walked the final stretch under a canopy of oak trees I had planted myself a decade ago. From the outside, the house glowed. Lights blazed from every window, spilling onto the manicured lawn. The faint thump of a bass line pulsed in the evening air. It looked like a picture of happiness, a perfect advertisement for a perfect life. My life, repurposed by my enemies. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the stone pathway and pushed open the heavy oak door. I did not need to knock. The blast of warm air, laughter, and music hit me like a physical blow. The interior was almost unrecognizable. Sarah had replaced my carefully chosen minimalist furniture with gaudy, oversized pieces that screamed of new money. She had hung abstract art on the walls that was loud and meaningless, covering the subtle, textured wallpaper I had imported from Japan. She was not just living in my house, she was actively erasing me from it. Heads turned as I entered. Conversations faltered for a moment, before restarting, a little too loudly. I was the main exhibit, the spectacle everyone had come to see. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of pity, morbid curiosity, and for a few, genuine discomfort. These were my colleagues, our mutual friends, even some of my distant family. They had chosen a side, and it was not mine. Mark saw me first. He detached himself from a group and approached, his face a mask of forced joviality. "Jack, you made it. We were getting worried." He tried to clap my shoulder again, but this time I shifted slightly, and his hand landed awkwardly on my arm. "You threw a party for me, Mark." "Of course I came," I said, my voice even and calm. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Yeah, well, look, I know things have been difficult, but Sarah really wanted to do this, to clear the air, to show that we can all be adults about this." "Adults," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us. I looked at this man who had shared my deepest secrets, who had stood by my side at my wedding, and felt nothing but a cold, vast emptiness. The betrayal was so complete it had cauterized the wound. There was nothing left to feel. Sarah glided over then, a queen coming to inspect her domain. She kissed my cheek, a cold, dry press of her lips. "Jack, darling, you look, well." The subtext was clear. "You look like hell, and it brings me immense joy." "You look the same as ever, Sarah," I replied, which was true. She was still beautiful, but now her beauty seemed sharp and dangerous, like a shard of broken glass. She smiled, taking Mark's arm again, possession asserted. "Come, let's get you a drink. Everyone is dying to say hello." For the next hour, I was paraded around my own home like a prisoner of war. I endured the awkward handshakes, the insincere wishes for a happy birthday. I saw my accountant, who now handled Sarah and Mark's finances, avert his gaze. I saw my cousin, who had borrowed money from me years ago and never paid it back, laughing loudly at one of Mark's jokes. Each interaction was a small paper cut on my soul. David Chen's team moved among the guests silently. They were ghosts in black and white uniforms, refilling glasses, offering hors d'oeuvres, their faces impassive. One of them, a young man I recognized from David's office, caught my eye and gave a subtle nod toward the large, blank wall at the end of the great room. The stage was set. Finally, the moment came. Sarah tapped a spoon against her champagne flute, calling for attention. The room quieted down. This was the main event. This was the moment she had been planning all along. "I just want to say a few words about our guest of honor," she began, her voice resonating with false emotion. "Jack Riley, a man who taught me so much. He taught me about ambition, about how to build things. He built this incredible house around us." She paused, letting the statement land. People nodded, looking around the room appreciatively. "But sometimes," she continued, her tone shifting to one of mock sympathy. When you're so focused on building walls, you forget to build bridges. When you're so obsessed with the blueprints of a structure, you neglect the foundation of a relationship. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but most were captivated by the drama. This was better than reality television. But we're not here to dwell on the past, she said, raising her glass. We are here to celebrate Jack turning 50, a new chapter, and to show him that even though some things end, we can all move forward with grace. We certainly have. She looked at Mark with a loving gaze that made my stomach turn. So, a toast to Jack. May the next 50 years be filled with new opportunities and less work. The room erupted. It was a vicious, perfectly crafted speech, painting me as a failure in life and love, and her as the graceful survivor. As the applause died down, she walked over to me, her eyes glittering with triumph. She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. "You're welcome to stay for cake," she sneered. That was the signal. I have to pause here. Standing in that room, facing that level of public humiliation, a person has a choice. You can retreat, let the shame consume you, and walk out the door defeated. Or you can hold your ground, knowing that the most powerful response is not to raise your voice, but to change the entire game. What would you have done in Jack's shoes? Walk out and preserve what little dignity you had left? Or would you stay for the fight? Let me know in the comments below. I am genuinely curious to hear your thoughts. Now, let's get back to the story. I held Sarah's gaze. I did not flinch. I did not speak. I simply gave her that slow, deliberate nod. Then, I turned my head just enough to make eye contact with David, who was standing by the fireplace, looking like a high-end butler. He saw my nod. He touched his earpiece, and the world changed. The upbeat party music did not just fade out. It was cut off abruptly. The main lights in the great room dimmed to a low, theatrical glow, leaving only a few spotlights active. The sudden shift in atmosphere silenced the entire room. People looked around in confusion, their laughter caught in their throats. A low hum filled the air, and a large white projector screen I had never seen before descended silently from a hidden recess in the ceiling. Sarah and Mark looked just as confused as their guests. Mark shot a questioning look at Sarah, who just shrugged, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. She probably thought it was some tacky surprise Mark had planned without telling her. A few people pulled out their phones, ready to record the cheesy birthday slideshow they assumed was coming next. A powerful, professional voice, a voiceover from a documentary, filled the room. "Legacy," the voice declared. "It is not what we leave for people. It is what we leave in people." And on the screen, a title appeared in elegant, clean font. A tribute to Jack Riley's legacy. Sarah actually smiled. This was better than she could have imagined. A public tribute to my work, right before she cut the cake, would only amplify her narrative of me being the man who cared only for his career. The screen began to show a montage of my greatest architectural achievements. The Harrison Tower downtown, the Serenity Chapel by the lake, the award-winning community center I designed for a low-income neighborhood. The images were beautiful, professionally shot, set to soaring, inspirational music. I could see the guests nodding in approval. I was the tragic artist, and they were witnesses to my story. And then the music stopped. The screen went black for a second. When the image returned, it was not a beautiful building. It was a close-up of a legal document, a loan application. The inspirational music was replaced by a faint, almost subliminal humming noise. The camera on the screen zoomed in on the signature line. My name, Jack Riley, was scrawled there. Then, another box appeared next to it, showing my actual signature from my driver's license. They were not even close. A forgery. A clumsy one. The voiceover returned, but its tone had changed. It was no longer warm. It was cold, clinical, and factual. Document 1. A fraudulent application for a $250,000 business loan, filed on October 12th. The signature, a forgery. The bank, United Trust. The loan was approved based on the applicant leveraging the portfolio and personal credit of Jack Riley. A gasp went through the crowd. I looked over and saw my accountant's face turn ghost white. Before anyone could fully process it, the screen changed again. Now it was a transcription of a phone call, the text scrolling up the screen as the audio played through the high-fidelity speakers David's team had hidden around the room. It was Sarah's voice, light and laughing. He's so wrapped up in his own misery he'll never even notice. His credit is perfect. We can pull another 50 from this one, easy. Then Mark's voice, lower, more conspiratorial. What about old man Henderson? Did he bite on the condo project? Hook, line, and sinker, Sarah replied, the sound of her smug laugh now echoing through the dead silent room. He practically begged us to take his money. He trusts Jack's name more than he trusts his own children. Every head in the room swiveled toward a stunned, elderly man standing near the back. Mr. Henderson. His face was a contorted mask of disbelief and dawning horror. His wife had her hand over her mouth. The screen changed again. An email from Mark to Sarah. Subject: Easy money. The body of the email detailed a plan to solicit smaller, five-figure investments from friends for a guaranteed return real estate flip. The email listed names. I saw my cousin's name on the list. I saw the name of a woman who had been my assistant for 10 years. Both of them were in the room, their faces now pale with shock and anger. The cell phones that had been out to record a birthday tribute were now all pointed at the screen, and then at the hosts. The laughter had died completely. In its place was a silence so heavy, so profound, it felt like it could shatter glass. I looked at Sarah and Mark. They were frozen, their smiles from moments before the now grotesque, melting masks of horror. They were trapped in the spotlight, on the stage they had built for me, and the audience was finally seeing them for who they truly were. The video was still playing, and the worst was yet to come. The final piece of evidence to grace the screen was a video. It was secretly recorded on a cell phone, likely by Mark himself, a little trophy of his conquest. It showed him and Sarah sitting on the patio of my house, drinking wine. The sun was setting behind them. It must have been filmed just a few weeks prior. "Are you sure he'll show up?" Mark asked, swirling his glass. Sarah laughed, a sound that was now stripped of all its charm. "Of course he will. His pride won't let him stay away. He has to see what he's lost, one last time. We'll have 100 people here, all our friends, all smiling at him, pitying him. It will be the perfect little death for his ego. After tonight, he will be nothing more than a ghost story we tell at parties." She took a long sip of wine. "And once the last of these investment checks clear, we'll be ghosts too. Gone. A new life in the Caymans, funded by the fools who still believe in the great Jack Riley." The video ended. The screen went black. The low, ominous hum ceased. For a full 10 seconds, The only sound in the room was the faint clinking of ice in a forgotten glass. It was a silence so complete, so absolute, that it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Then the dam broke. It was not a shout that broke the silence, but a low, guttural moan of fury. Mr. Henderson took a staggering step forward, his face purple with rage. "My retirement!" he choked out, pointing a trembling finger at Sarah. "You took my entire retirement!" His voice opened the floodgates. A woman began to sob uncontrollably. My former assistant, a quiet woman named Maria, yelled out, "My children's college fund! You told me it was a sure thing!" My cousin, looking horrified, simply stared at Mark, repeating the word, "Why?" over and over like a mantra. The room descended into chaos. Accusations flew like shrapnel. People were shouting, crying, pointing. They were no longer party guests. They were a mob of the betrayed, and they had found their tormentors. Sarah, for the first time, looked truly terrified. Her queenly composure shattered, replaced by the wild-eyed panic of a cornered animal. "It's fake!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "He faked it all! He's a bitter, jealous man trying to ruin me." But no one was listening. Her words were drowned out by the chorus of her victims. Mark did not even try to speak. He simply stood there, his body slack, his face ashen. He looked like a building whose foundations had just been vaporized. He was already a ruin. Through the chaos, David Chen and two of his waiters moved with calm professionalism. They flanked the projector and equipment, ensuring their evidence was secure. David walked calmly to Mr. Henderson and handed him a business card. "My lawyer," David said in a low, clear voice. "He's the best. He's already been briefed on the situation. I suggest everyone who has been affected by these two contact him immediately. We will be pursuing a class action suit." I did not stay to watch the rest. My part was done. I turned and walked toward the door, moving through the sea of chaos I had unleashed. No one noticed me leave. All eyes were on the crumbling king and queen of the castle. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I heard the first wail of a police siren in the distance. Someone must have called them. The party was officially over. The aftermath was a slow, methodical demolition. The story of the birthday party takedown became a local sensation. The videos from the guests' phones went viral. The news covered it, not just as a story of financial fraud, but as a piece of high-stakes domestic drama, a tale of calculated revenge. Sarah and Mark were publicly eviscerated. Their names became synonymous with treachery. The legal battle was not a battle at all. It was a siege, and they had no defenses. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. One by one, their victims testified. In the depositions, Sarah's lies became more and more frantic and unbelievable, while Mark sat in a stupor of defeated silence. My own lawsuit to have the divorce settlement overturned on the grounds of gross fraud was the final wrecking ball. I remember the day my lawyer called. I was in my apartment looking at the blueprints for a small coastal home I was designing. "We won, Jack," he said, his voice flat and professional, but with an undercurrent of satisfaction. "The judge ruled in our favor. The original settlement is null and void. The house is yours. They have 30 days to vacate." He paused. "And with the civil judgments from the other lawsuits, they'll be lucky if they can afford a tent. They're financially ruined." I thanked him, hung up the phone, and continued to draw. There was no elation, no surge of triumphant joy. There was only a quiet, profound sense of order being restored. The crooked lines had been made straight. A month later, I walked up the stone pathway to my house for the second time in as many months. This time, there were no lights, no music. The lawn was slightly overgrown. A moving truck was pulling away from the curb as I arrived. I put the new key into the lock. It turned smoothly. I stepped inside. The house was empty. The gaudy furniture was gone. The ugly art taken down, leaving faint rectangles on the walls like ghosts. The air was stale, but it was my air. The space was hollow, but it was my space. I walked through the silent rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. I ran my hand along the cool stone of the fireplace mantel. It felt like greeting an old friend who had been held hostage and was finally home. The cleansing took weeks. I had the entire house repainted, the floors sanded and refinished. I brought back my own sparse, functional furniture. Slowly, I reclaimed the soul of the place. I was not erasing what had happened, but I was building over it, creating something new and stronger on the old foundations. My career, which had stalled during the dark years, was reborn. The story, ironically, had made me famous. I was not just the architect who designed beautiful houses. I was the strategist who had meticulously planned and executed the downfall of his enemies. New clients sought me out. They were not just looking for a designer. They were looking for a man of integrity, a man who understood that a structure is only as strong as its core. One day, I got a call from a city councilwoman. She had seen the news. She had a project for me. The city wanted to build a new public library and community justice center. "We need someone who understands what it means to build something that lasts," she said, "something that represents fairness and second chances." That is how I got the nickname, first in a newspaper column, then among my colleagues, the architect of second chances. It stuck. Sometimes I stand in the great room, my great room, and look out the large picture window at the oak trees in the yard. I do not think about Sarah or Mark. They are footnotes in my story, ghosts from a life that is no longer mine. I think about foundations. I spent a lifetime designing them for buildings, ensuring they were strong enough to withstand storms and the ravages of time. But I learned a hard lesson. The most important foundations are not made of concrete and steel. They are built with integrity, patience, and an unbreakable belief in one's own worth. My old life had to be demolished to the ground. But from the rubble, I built a new one, on a foundation that nothing and no one could ever shake again. What a journey. What an incredible display of patience and strategy. Jack's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most effective form of justice is not a loud, angry confrontation, but a quiet, intelligent, and perfectly executed plan. He did not just get revenge. He reclaimed his life, his reputation, and his home, all by refusing to stoop to his enemy's level. He rose above it. Thank you so much for joining me for this story today. I truly appreciate you spending your time here with me. If you found Jack's story as compelling as I did, please do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new tale. Your support is what allows me to keep finding and sharing these incredible stories. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read as many as I can. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you again soon for the next story.